Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of What's New in Prisma. My name is Nicholas Berg and I'm here with my colleague Sabin. Sabin, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. I just got back from Jamstack Conf, and so I'm still feeling the hype from it.
Oh, yes. And I definitely want to talk to you about Jamstack Conf a little bit later. In fact, we are going to bring on our new colleague, Steven, who was there with you. And once he's on the stream, I think we'll debrief a little bit and talk about your highlights and what you've experienced and who you've talked to at Jamstack Conf.
Yeah.
But we have a packed stream today, actually. I'm really excited and looking forward to everything that we have planned. So, of course, first we'll start by reviewing the release notes of this past release from Tuesday. Then we'll talk to Brandon Beyer, the creator of BlitzJS and founder of Flight Control. Also really excited to have him on the stream and talk about the tooling that he is working on. And then, as I already mentioned, I did give it away already. We'll have Steven, our new colleague, on the stream today, and we'll be introducing him. And he'll talk a little bit about his background and how he got to join us as a developer advocate. So, yeah. I would say we go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to share my screen with the release notes here. Share and pull them up. And let me increase the font here a little bit. All right. And here are the nameplates. There you go. So a couple of features that we added last Tuesday in the 4.6 release. So for those of you who are using the data proxy, you might have been aware that you aren't able to use the interactive transactions preview feature together with the data proxy. That was just not possible for a while. You either were using the data proxy or you were using the interactive transactions preview feature. Now this has been fixed and you can actually use the interactive transactions with the data proxy together. So that should be good news for everybody who wanted to use these two features in combination. Then another feature that we introduced, or that we where we rather updated the implementation. So this is not going to change too much in user land for people who are using the Prisma Client API. You don't have to make any changes to your code. It's just an improvement under the hood that is now happening. So for the upsert operations that we expose, operations that we expose in Prisma Client, we actually weren't using the native database level upsert operations beforehand that are provided by databases like Postgres, SQLite, or Cockroach. And when possible in Prisma, actually, we are trying to leverage the functionality of the underlying database instead of adding our own implementations. So one kind of design goal of the entire philosophy of Prisma is that we want to give developers the power of their underlying database and not abstract it away. And that was actually the case with the previous upsert implementation for some of the databases that we supported. But that's now fixed, and we now have the native upserts for Postgres, SQLite, and CockroachDB. Then there are some small feature changes to the relation mode preview feature. I think we renamed the referential integrity to relation mode. And also some improvements to the extended where unique preview feature that we had talked about on the last stream, Sabin. I don't know if you remember that. This extended where unique feature was, it introduces the option for developers to add more filtering fields into their find unique queries. And that just allows them to add further constraints to their queries, basically. Really handy in various use cases.
Right. Previously, that was just like the unique fields or like the IDs, right? And now it's sort of extended to open up to everything.
Exactly. Before 4.5, we only allowed that find unique parameters could only take unique fields. That's still the case. So one unique field is still required. But in addition to this one unique field, you can now include an arbitrary number of additional fields from that particular model to also filter by.
Nice.
All right, more fixes and improvements, just a long list of things that happened, and a quick call out for the design partner program that we'll actually also talk about a little bit later on the stream. So I'm not going to talk about it too much yet. The only thing that I want to say is that this is a program that we at Prisma have initiated to closely collaborate with existing Prisma users to build features that help their workflows, especially in serverless environments. And these are features that we are going to incorporate into the Prisma data platform, into our commercial product, and that eventually developers or development teams will be able to use. But if you join the design partner program, you'll be able to tell us what you need. We'll develop these features closely in close collaboration together with you. And I think it's also the plan to give you credits for the collaboration. So if you actually work together with us, you can expect to get some credits for the Prisma data platform for the features that you're using there. All right. I think that was already the first section, and now we can move on to our first guest, and that's Brandon Beyer from Blitz. Let him pull up on the stage as we play this short transition video. Welcome, Brandon.
Hello, everyone.
It's very nice to, yeah, we are doing great. We are doing great. Sabin just came back from JamstackConf, and I had a pretty busy week, to be honest, but I'm excited that we can do the stream together. It's been a while that we've touched base, so I'm curious to learn where Blitz is these days. But before we jump into, actually, maybe you could just give a quick introduction of who yourself and who you are and how you got to the place of building a web application framework with Blitz, basically.
Cool. So longtime software engineer, also airplane, helicopter pilot, but we don't have time to talk about that today, I don't think. So I was working as a freelancer. I love JavaScript, I love TypeScript and type safety, but I just got frustrated with having to assemble everything all the time from scratch, and it's like I really kind of missed the experience I had from Ruby on Rails, where you have a bit more of a framework experience. Like I didn't want that much like of a framework, that heavy, but I just wanted like just the best parts of Ruby on Rails, and it didn't exist in JavaScript, and so that's why I went off and created BlitzJS about 2.5 years ago, and so it's done very well.
Very nice. Actually, let's pick up there. I'm curious, what were the best parts of Ruby on Rails that you wanted to see in the JavaScript world? Kind of what were the things that you found missing?
So one was just being able to have everything running locally. Like at the time, there was a lot of people for authentication. They were saying, "Oh, just use a third-party service like Auth0." And I'm like, "No, like that's just too much pain and it's so hard to develop it locally and all this stuff." So I really wanted a really good authentication library that could run locally, that could use my own database for sessions. It didn't exist. And so we built BlitzAuth, which you can use even if you don't use any of the rest of Blitz. It was actually created about the same time as NextAuth, so there was like multiple people there. But they're two very different approaches to solve the same problem. So that was one. Secondly was with like React apps, you have this API layer, right? Like you gotta get your API back and forth. Even if you're using server-side rendering to read data, you still need an API to actually write your data, right? In the Rails world, where everything is server-side rendered, it's just super easy. Like you don't have to write API endpoints, you don't have to use REST or GraphQL. And I wanted that because it's just so fast to develop. And so I came up with this like really, really cool idea that allows you to write functions that run on the server import them into your front end, and it just works. So you no longer have to write a REST API or GraphQL API. What happens is an RPC API is generated for you automatically at build time. And so Blitz handles all of that, those hard parts for you, and just lets you focus on getting your data back and forth. And of course, that gives you type safety out of the box without a code generation process or anything. So it's super cool.
That's very nice. I did not warn you, by the way. I'm not sure if you prepared any kind of demo or something. If you're able to, if you would be able to,
yeah, I can share.
To give one. But like, in fact, I also still have a couple of questions, so we don't have to do that like right off the bat. I was very intrigued when you said, when you started talking about RPCs. For me, the main memory I have of RPC was in my networking class in university when we were coding C and we were writing these remote procedure calls where like I was just calling a function in my code, but under the hood, it would open this TCP connection to the server and it would communicate under the hood over the network. But to me as a consumer of that function, it really just looked like a local function. So exactly. Is that the same idea that you've been following with Blitz there?
Yes, exactly. So all you need to care about is what goes in the pipe and what comes out, and we handle the pipe for you. So it sounds magical, and it is, but it's very minimal. Like it's super easy to inspect with DevTools or whatever. So it's not like we get in the way of what you're doing.
That sounds amazing.
Really
and
cool.
Is it still using HTTP under the hood, or what's kind of the transport layer?
It's just a simple JSON API, which is a certain specification that you can use. Like you can just call it from anywhere if you want. But if you use it inside with the Blitz client libraries, then you don't have to do the fetching yourself.
All right. And so like I think that Blitz also underwent a bit of an evolution, right? It started out as a fully fledged framework, I think, and then it evolved into like, what would you call it these days? Is it still a framework? Is it a toolkit?
It's a bit,
what do you call it?
We're kind of going with toolkit. So previously we fully abstracted Next.js. Turns out it's just too difficult. It's just Next.js has a lot of changes, whatever, and turns out it's better to be framework agnostic tool because there's new frameworks all the time, and so when I went this pivot, we skipped 1.0 and went straight to 2.0 so now Blitz 2.0 is in beta. We're almost ready to ship the stable release, and it's just a toolkit that goes on top of Next.js, or really it's set up so that we can support any frameworks. We haven't done docs or anything for any other frameworks, but it's set up that way. Super easy to add to an existing Next.js application.
Out of curiosity, do you know of anybody using it with other frameworks than Next.js right now? Are people like actually taking advantage of that?
I don't know of anyone at the moment.
Okay, yeah, that'd be cool to play around with. I'm just going through in my head like, ooh, I want to try this.
Yeah, we're just now starting to work on guides on like how to use just BlitzAuth with Next.js, how to use how to use BlitzAuth with TRPC, like starting to have the guides on these like mix and match things. So we'll get there for the other frameworks too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool.
And how big is the team that's working on Next at the moment? Are you on Blitz? Sorry, are you still the core maintainer?
So yeah, I'm still core maintainer. We have two other core team members. One that's an employee of Flight Control, Dylan. So he's leading the maintaining of Blitz. And then we have a couple other core team members that are just like on part-time volunteer basis.
Is there any special kind of integration between Blitz and Flight Control? Will it make it easier for me? And we should quickly mention, like, Flight Control is a startup that you've also founded. It is this platform, I think, for like app deployment as well. I imagine as a simpler alternative to Heroku, basically.
Our opinion is that platforms as a service like Heroku shouldn't exist, and you should use AWS directly. but just have better tooling that gives you the same developer experience as you get with Heroku or whatever, but directly on AWS, because then you have full control. You don't have any of the limitations. And so that's Flight Control, launched back in beginning of this year, growing really well. People love it. So we don't have any Blitz specific optimizations, because Blitz is just a toolkit that goes on a framework. Like, Blitz is not something that you host anymore. It's like you'd be hosting Next.js. But we do have things for Next.js. So we work really well for fail-wire validate, like ISR with Next.js. This is one of the absolute hardest things to do to get working correctly if you're self-hosting Next.js, if you're running in containers on AWS. And we solve all of those problems for you.
I see. All right, then maybe let's jump into a demo. I see that you've shared your screen already. I'll pull it up on the stream here, and
let me know
looking forward to see what you've put up here.
Let me know when the screen is up.
It's up there.
So another part of this kind of Ruby on Rails experience is if you use the Blitz CLI to generate an app, which again you don't have to, but if you're starting a new app, I would recommend it. We generate a lot of the scaffolding that you need just to get started. So for example, out of the box, authentication is fully set up. You have all your forgot password functionality. All of that's fully set up, and it's ready for you to customize like the look and feel, right? So we'll just go ahead and run BlitzDev. This is just running NextDev. It has a bit of features around loading environment variables. Let's see. Oh, it looks like we have a couple of things that we need to fix in this release. But this is what you get. So out of the box, you can go ahead and just sign up as a user.
That is super handy.
And you're logged in. Like that's it. And now, like, oh, okay, let's like start scaffolding out some stuff. So let's take this CLI command, run blitz generate, and that is going to generate all of the pages we need for a project. So git, create, update, delete. It's going to add the model to database using Prisma, and it's going to create the migration. And now we can run blitz dev again, and we can go to /projects, and now, we have a bug here. But normally it would.
You would see a form where you can now go ahead
you would
and
see
enter
a form.
the fields.
Yes.
I see.
And so nice. I can quickly show how the RPC thing works. So if we just go to, I'm going to have to change my my Vim setting, because normally I use light mode. Okay, here we go. So this is Git project page for viewing a single project. And so we're using this query, which is wrapped around React query. And so on the client, you can see we're just getting this project back. But what's this Git project thing? Like, where is this actually coming from? So this is a function. If we go look at this file, this is actually just a function that runs on the server. And so like these two screens that you're looking at is like literally all there is for client-side data fetching. So you write the server. On the bottom, we have the function that runs on the server. We use Prisma to query the project from the database. And then you just return it, and then it shows up on your front end. And then you get that type safety and everything.
Amazing.
So then it works exactly the same way for mutations.
That's super cool. I really like the experience in the beginning, by the way, the way how you scaffold the application, that you immediately present the login screen, and that you also on the landing page of this kind of scaffolded application, you show the instructions to run a command that then is doing something again. This kind of just like thinking through the flow of the user and like holding their hand along every step of the way, I think is incredibly valuable in dev tools and in their developer experience these days. So I really, really like that. That's a great flow.
Yeah, so it works really good for people like juniors and people just getting started. It makes it so easy, just to get things going and working. And as a senior, if you like that, then which I do, I love it. But you can also like totally skip that and just piece together your own application from scratch using just some of the parts of Blitz as well, like BlitzAuth and BlitzRPC.
Yeah, that would have been my next question. If I wanted to make any schema changes that are not to add a new model or something like this, I can still go and make manual modifications to the Prisma schema myself, probably, right?
Exactly. My terminal just was being goofy, but yeah. So the Prisma schema, like we don't abstract Prisma. Like it's just Prisma, just like with any other application.
That's awesome.
And then we have how we integrate, how Blitz auth integrates with Prisma is we have the Prisma storage adapter, which is how you hook up. So if you use certain table names and field names in your Prisma schema, then you can use this adapter. Otherwise, you can define the session read write functions on your own, and you can use Redis or other Prisma structure or whatever.
Very, very nice. Okay, I apologize upfront for this question. I think you will get it a lot, but how does this compare to TRPC?
Great question. So TRPC was inspired by Blitz. They wanted a standalone thing because Blitz was an all-in-one framework. So now they're much more equivalent. We're getting ready to add a standalone interface so that if you're not using the next compiler, like if you want to use BlitzRPC with React Native, currently TRPC has an edge there, but we're going to be adding a equivalent API very, very soon before the stable release. So they're both two ways to get the same type safety, to get the same kind of fast productivity. Overall, they take a couple very different approaches to how they manage some of the middleware and context and things like that. So TRPC ends up with quite a bit more boilerplate, but some people like that, and so try both and see what you like the best.
Awesome.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's cool to see this all working and going from like sort of start to an application in your demo here. Me and I think it was Tom Preston Warner from Redwood. We're just talking at Jamstack the other day that we need more frameworks like this, more things that give you a little more pieces, like little Lego blocks that you can stick together to get going. I feel like the JavaScript ecosystem right now is kind of like we all love to build our own things, so we don't have a lot of these like prepackaged tools to like get things going for you.
Exactly.
So stuff like this is like really needed, and people really like this kind of stuff. I know I do. So it's very cool to see it working.
All right, thanks for that overview for Blitz. If you have like 3-4 minutes, can we talk a little bit more about flight control as well? I'm just curious of where you're at with the company at the moment. Is it production ready? What kind of use cases are especially well suited? What do you think is the target audience? I'm just curious to get the 3-minute overview, basically.
Yeah, so we went through Y Combinator back in the spring. That was awesome. We have over 200 users using us in production now. We just passed 15,000 total deployments. And so things are going really, really well. We support deploying servers, private servers, so like private worker servers, database using RDS, and static sites. And then we're soon adding Redis and more things like that. So what happens is you connect your GitHub account, your AWS account to flight control, git push, and we handle everything else for you. So you don't have to use Terraform or any of this other like headache, mind-bending AWS stuff, right? Like you just get a super easy developer experience that you want, but on AWS. So we take the best AWS services like Fargate and RDS, and just make them really, really, really easy to use. So if you're not an AWS expert, that's fine. It works great. But if you are, then you can optionally go into AWS and like inspect everything and like customize and tweak, and it just works. So that's the benefit, is that you get the developer experience without any of the abstraction limitations. We have preview environments. So make a pull request, you get a full stack preview environment. So not just your front end, but also like a back end, private workers, database, all of that works really well.
Interesting.
Okay, that actually is really interesting. We recently had Peter from Snaplet on the show here. Have you heard of Snaplet before?
Oh yes, we're going to be adding an integration with them.
All right, yeah, since that sounds very similar, right? If you get the entire preview environment, then I guess that preview databases are part of that. So if you add an integration, does that mean that I, as a Snaplet user, when I use flight control, I can just say, okay, I want my preview database provisioned by Snaplet, or what exactly will the
We're not sure
do?
exactly how that's going to work yet, but yeah, like that's the idea.
Okay.
And then even more so is being able to, on a PR by PR basis, say like, hey, I want this this deployment connected to my production database, or I want to connect it to like an ephemeral Snaplet powered database.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think that kind of developer workflow is really still missing. That you not only get the preview URL with the front end, but that everybody working on a PR gets their dedicated, isolated environment, including the database.
Exactly.
We've talked to a lot of people also about this at Prisma, and it's also mind-bending the alternative workflows that people are coming up to solve this for themselves. And it's like certainly a big opportunity for DevTools to provide a better experience there.
Yeah. We use PlanetScale for our production database, and we have the same thing there, right? Like we need to add an integration with them so that we will automatically create a PlanetScale branch for your PR, right? So that's something we have to do. So yeah, you can use flight control is great for production stuff, or if you already have production that you want to keep and you want to use flight control just for the preview environments, then that's totally fine too.
Awesome.
Yeah, it sounds super cool to me. It sounds like something that, like usually with like a Heroku or something like that, like you're kind of wary to put anything really production heavy up on it because you don't quite know how it's working under the scenes. I love that you can just go into your AWS account and tweak and actually see things. Like I would be way more comfortable deploying a full scale application to something like this where you get that fine granular control.
Yes, exactly.
It really also sounds like the better Heroku, where I think under the hood they also used AWS infrastructure, but I wasn't able to turn these knobs if I needed to. So having that flexibility definitely is a big benefit here.
That's exactly the idea. Yeah.
All right, Brandon, any last words that you want to share with our viewers before we let you go?
If you want free Blitz and flight control stickers, go to blitzjs.com/docs/stickers and put in your address, and we'll mail you free stickers anywhere in the world.
All right, you've heard it, folks. Get your Blitz and flight control stickers.
Nice.
Brandon, thank you so much for joining us. I think that was a great conversation.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.
All right, that was really cool.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome stuff. It's funny because a lot of the stuff he was talking about at JamstackConf, I was having conversations about some of the same exact stuff, people wanting pretty much exactly that. So if any of you guys that I talked to are listening to the stream, go check out Blitz.
Nice. What I found interesting as well is when we talked about how how flight control is basically just a layer on top of AWS. It reminded me actually a little bit of the evolution that we took with Prisma. At first, we were GraphQL, which was just an entire backend system. It was a black box. Nobody was able to actually change anything in the database directly or anything like this. So that was maybe more the Heroku of the deployment world. You've got a nice interface to set something up. But then as we evolved, we figured out, okay, people actually want the control under the hood. They still want the nice experience on the surface, but if they need to have the ability to kind of drop down to the lower level and actually work on that lower level of abstraction. And that's exactly what flight control does as well, I think. So yeah, I like this comparison between Heroku and flight control, GraphQL and Prisma. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. I think with that, we can bring on our next guest and new colleague. So I'll play the transition as we bring Stephen on the show.
Hello.
Hey, Stephen. It's great to see you.
It's great to be here. Thanks.
Yeah. Long time no see.
Right? It's been a couple days.
Yeah.
Yeah, you two were at JamstackConf together, right? And we'll want to talk a little bit about this in just a bit. But maybe you can first take a minute and introduce yourself, Stephen. Who are you? Where are you joining us from? And then after that, we'll talk a little bit about your kind of Prisma story, how you got into the community and actually got to working with us as well.
Sure. Yeah. I'm Stephen. I'm the newest developer advocate at Prisma. I'm really excited to join the team. Let's see. I've been in engineering and web development for a little over 10 years. Probably about 10 years ago was really making websites by contract, moved into agency, and then got into application engineering. Worked at GetPrime, which was acquired by Pluralsight. Then moved on to Clean Capital. Most recently, I was an engineer at Lattice, and yeah, found Prisma. Really wanted to move into developer advocacy and write more and speak more, engage with the open source community.
Nice. What was the technology stack you got started with? Were you always working in the JavaScript ecosystem, or did you work with other programming languages before?
Yeah, not at all. I think I found my first HTML book when I was like 9 or 10 years old. Just was obsessed with it, and I was just thinking about it. I think I started out with like PHP 4 and MySQL, probably version 3 or 4 back then.
Wow.
In the early 2000s, I think. And from there, eventually got into Rails, Django, and kind of discovered JavaScript when sort of the JavaScript renaissance was happening. I remember when CoffeeScript came out, and then TypeScript kind of took over. And so huge fan of TypeScript. It's really been my go-to language of choice for the last 7 or 8 years.
You skipped Flow in that evolution.
Yeah, I had a little Flow experience in there. I think it was really good to have the competition between Flow and TypeScript for bringing type safety to the JavaScript ecosystem.
Nice. So you have a lot of engineering experience under your belt. You worked at Lattice, you said. I think you also worked there as an engineering lead in the end, right? You were actually managing a software team.
Yeah, as a staff software engineer. So
okay.
A lot of my role was involved mentoring other engineers and kind of setting some project direction. But really a lot of support for other engineers and kind of being very familiar with the tech stack and helping engineers who were less familiar with TypeScript, less familiar with GraphQL and all the tools we were using.
Was that what sparked your interest in becoming a developer advocate, that you had to do so much mentoring already at work that you thought, hey, why don't I do this for an actual living?
Yeah, absolutely. I realized that my favorite part of the job is jumping on a Zoom call with someone and helping them learn a new skill, learn a new tool, learning from them. Really, if I can get on a call with someone and help them solve a problem, that just gives me such a motivation boost. And I realized that, hey, I can do this full time. I can engage with the community. I can learn from them. I can teach them. I find that incredibly enjoyable.
I feel like that's a common story for developer advocates, where they're like sort of doing it internally at their companies already. And then they find out from somebody like, hey, this is actually a job. Like, I know when I started here at Prisma, I didn't even know this was a job. And now I feel like I just get paid to do the stuff that I love and have fun with. So yeah, I'm glad that you're able to transition into this. It's going to be really fun. I'm excited to see.
Yeah, to be honest, several months ago, I didn't even know developer advocate was a job, or it was never something I'd actually considered. I went from junior engineer to senior, and then engineering manager, and then staff engineer, and I think developer advocate was what I was actually aiming for the whole time.
That's so great. And we are really happy to have you on the team and see what you'll be up to in the next couple of weeks and months that we're working together. How did you actually kind of first hear about Prisma? What was your first exposure and then your path into the Prisma ecosystem and community?
Yeah, I remember reading about Prisma when it was still GraphQool. I never got a chance to use it back then, and the API was quite a bit different. But I think it was probably a couple years ago, maybe through a blog post, that I discovered Prisma 2 or 3 and tried it out on a personal project and just fell in love.
Nice. What other kind of database libraries have you worked with before that?
Yeah, so I had mentioned that I have a little experience with Rails and quite a bit of experience with Django. So Django ORM was probably the ORM that I had the most experience as I was growing my career. And there's a lot of really great things about it, and some things I don't love as much. In the TypeScript and Node.js ecosystem, I've tried Connects and Sequelize and TypeORM and Prisma. Really, there's a few standout things about Prisma that I just really love. Obviously, type safety. I couldn't live without Prisma inferring the types for my queries automatically. The schema file, just being able to have one file that represents the current state of my database is so helpful. And then finally, the quality of the documents or documentation. I go and read the docs, and they're well written, they're comprehensive, incredibly useful.
Nice. That's always great to hear. That's music in our ears, and even greater that we were able to now pull you into our team to also spread that message among the developer community.
Yeah.
So what were the contexts or the projects in which you've used Prisma already? Was it like mostly in personal projects or also at some work-related projects?
Yeah, mostly personal projects over the last couple of years. Also recently evaluating different ORMs for TypeScript and Node.js, and recently did a pretty comprehensive breakdown of all the different options available and pros and cons. There's trade-offs everywhere, and Prisma is really the one that stands out. That if I'm going to start a new project, that's the go-to tool I'm going to use, unless I have a really strong reason to use something else.
That's great. All right. Let's talk a little bit about your experience at JamstackConf. And I wasn't there. I couldn't join, but I think we had a booth there. And overall, what I've seen on Twitter looked like a great conference. Maybe you can share a couple of your highlights or things that you've particularly enjoyed. Maybe Sabin, you can start with how you experienced the conference these 2 days.
Yeah. So the one thing I was telling everybody who I was talking about this to was that these kind of conferences, specifically JamstackConf and like conferences with this group of people, these are like our people. These are the people we love to talk to and hang out with. I feel like walking into the conference, it was just a bunch of friends. I recognized like half the people there. So what was really cool about that, though, is that at our booth, usually we get a lot of people coming up to us asking like, hey, what's Prisma? What does it do? How is it better than, X tool? But here with this crowd, a lot of people already knew us and are using us because of things like Remix, Next.js, like a bunch of those different tools out there are sort of using us as the default already. So rather than like explaining what Prisma does and how to use it, it was more talking about Prisma, and people are already using it and sort of comparing notes and stuff. So it was really cool. It was really insightful. I talked to a lot of people who had really good ideas, and I talked to a lot of people who just sort of love what we're doing. So yeah, it was a great experience for me.
Very nice. How about you, Stephen?
Yeah, this is really my first like JavaScript conference. So it was just an amazing opportunity to go there, meet Sabin face to face, and engage with and meet so many great members of the JavaScript community. I didn't really get a chance to watch too many of the talks live because I wanted to network and I wanted to meet people.
Nice. Yeah, we also recently actually went to a couple of conferences. One here in Berlin. We had the serverless architecture conference about, I think it's already about a month ago. I gave a talk there about serverless connection management in serverless environments. And only, is it 2 weeks ago, when we went on an offsite with the developer advocacy team, we also, the first 2 days of the offsite we spent in Munich and attended the International JavaScript Conference together. So all 5 of us were together there, and we had a really good time. But one thing that stood out about these 2 conferences in particular was that there weren't quite the most community-oriented conferences I think that I've ever attended, and we found kind of a new way to categorize or think about conferences, and that's when the conference is happening in a carpeted hotel, that it probably doesn't have the most kind of developer-friendly and community-friendly vibes. So that was the case with both of these conferences. The serverless architecture conferences was in a kind of hotel as well. And then the International JavaScript Conference was in the Holiday Inn Center in the middle of Munich. And yeah, I think Sabin, just the week before the International JavaScript Conference, you actually also attended the React Advanced Conference in London. Right. And that was in, like, was a previous brewery or something?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It was like this old abandoned brewery. It was all like a brick building in the middle of London. And yeah, it was a really cool vibe. Very, very great conference, I think. But it definitely does. It speaks to that point you just made, where it wasn't in a carpeted hotel, so there was like more room for creativity setting up the whole conference, and it was a very cool setting.
Yeah, you can tell a lot about a conference by the location where it's held at. I don't know what it says about Prisma Day then that we held it in a beer garden this summer, but
it shows that you're German.
That's certainly also it shows that we're German. The German engineering aspect is what we wanted to emphasize here. All right, Stephen, we will keep you around for the remainder of the show, actually, because you're now a part of the team. There is no reason to let you go anymore. So I would suggest, I would say that we move on to the next segment, and we do that with a short transition. All right, I want to talk about the Prisma Design Partner Program before we are wrapping up today's stream. And I mentioned it already in the beginning of the stream when I scrolled down to the bottom of the release notes, that this is a program that we have initiated to work very closely together with our users to learn what kind of questions and problems they have when they're building data-intensive applications on serverless infrastructure using Prisma. So this is specifically for people that are existing Prisma users. Ideally, you're working in a company, in a development team, you're building something that's kind of commercially viable, and we want to collaborate with you to figure out what are the pain points that we can solve for you, and build these tools into the Prisma data platform that you can then use. And the great thing about this program is that we'll work very closely together with you and incorporate your feedback practically on a weekly basis. You will have like several sessions with our product teams to talk about the progress of the features. You'll get a prototype that you can use, and in the end, you'll even be able to get credits for the Prisma data platform once you're using these features in production. So here is the link to the form that you can fill out to apply. I will drop that in the comments, and also the link to the design partner program itself so that you can check it out and learn about all the details there. At the moment, we are looking at 4 different problem domains, so to say, that we want to solve and learn more about. The first one is the problem of listening and reacting to database changes in real time. So this is a very common use case, actually, that you can do with the Prisma ORM using tools like middleware, or you're setting up native database triggers and listening to them in using some other library. But this is not as straightforward or it's not super straightforward to build a reliable like update system like this for your database to build real-time applications like a chat application, or implement things like push notifications. These are the things that typically require some kind of real-time component inside of your application. And that's one problem area that we are looking at. And in fact, I will talk about this specifically in just a bit. The next problem that we are looking into is that coordinating workflows that are executed via a set of isolated functions or services are very difficult to coordinate. And it spreads that coordination logic across these services instead of keeping it centralized and maintainable. And this often just adds unnecessary overhead and clutter to your business logic. So it basically means that when you have these workflows and you're using serverless functions, that you often implement the logic to call other functions, for example, inside of the functions themselves. But this kind of logic actually is better pulled out of the function so that the functions can be focused on your actual business logic. And then you can have some kind of infrastructure layer, some kind of system that is taking over the coordination of these workflows. Another problem domain that we're looking at is just the performance aspect of working with traditional databases in serverless environments. That involves things like projecting data into denormalized views or caching. So if you build these kinds of things yourself, your development team easily is busy for a couple of weeks, if not months. And that's a kind of functionality that you also rather want to have some kind of external system, kind of tool to just take care of for you. And that's another problem domain that we're looking at. And then finally, building web applications on modern serverless platforms such as Vercel and Netlify often breaks down as soon as you need to execute any of the topics listed above. So just improving the overall developer experience, building serverless applications with traditional databases is what we're aiming to improve for people. So if that's you, if you're using serverless functions and you're working with traditional databases, then you're a prime candidate to join our design partner program, and we'd love to talk to you. So what does it look like, or how do you apply? First, to apply, you just fill out this form. I already dropped the link to that inside of the chat, so you can apply there. And then it says here also what the expectations are. So basically, we just want to have an open discussions with you about the general problem. We want to validate it. We want to figure out a solution with you. We'll do user testing sessions and pricing discussions to understand whether our pricing models actually also work for you. Regarding this user testing session, I prepared, or I didn't prepare them myself, but I brought the slide deck from the team that's running the Prisma Design Partner program. And that's the slide deck that they have created with 3 different approaches, just technical specifications, basically, just a technical outline of what it could look like if Prisma offered these real-time updates. So if you join the design partner program, then our the discovery team, as it's called, that's running this program, the discovery team is going to reach out to you. They'll jump on a call and they'll talk you through the ideas for the potential solutions for these problems that I just talked about. So in this case, here I won't go in too much detail. I just want to kind of familiarize you with the process that the discovery team is going to put in place. But in this case, this is about the problem of real-time updates and what potential solutions in Prisma could look like. So the first solution here would be the Prisma event pub sub. approach. So this would come with a new keyword in the Prisma schema, the event hub that you could set up like this. Then you could also add this new attribute to your models that's called channel. And that's where the messages will automatically be published. And then you can consume them via Prisma Client, for example, with an API like this. That's the first idea. The second idea is Prisma Client event listeners. That could look like this. Again, you have this kind of event hub primitive inside of the Prisma schema, and you subscribe attribute that you could use as well. And within your application, you can subscribe to changes like this. And finally, the last idea is to have Prisma live queries, so kind of inspired by the idea of GraphQL live queries, which would just work based on some special attributes that you would annotate your models with. So created at, deleted at, updated at could be examples here. And you can just subscribe to changes using this kind of async iterator in your TypeScript code then. And yeah, that's the way how we are approaching this program, by giving you the ideas for how we want to solve the problem. And we're really curious then kind of what is your preferred approach to then develop these solutions, again, in close collaboration with you. So you'll be able to use these as a prototype already in your applications, and later you'll get the credits for them in the Prisma Data Platform as well if you continue using these features.
I think this program here, it just goes to show that this is actually sort of the first time I'm seeing those slides and stuff, and so it's like the cogs are turning in my head. It's a very exciting time, not only to be working at Prisma, but to be using Prisma, because as we're defining this commercial product, we really have such a huge say in the direction it goes. So if you are one of those people who's maybe running up against a wall, and you want to provide some input, like definitely take advantage of this. This is a really cool opportunity, I think, to be able to have your voice heard. It's exciting.
Yeah, definitely. All right, friends. I think that was a really, really nice stream. Stephen, it was great to have you on today. I think we had a great discussion together with Brandon about Blitz and flight control. And I'm looking forward to see everybody again in 3 weeks.
Thanks. It was great to be here.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.
Yep.
Bye.